King David returned home without telling anyone. He had been away for several days handling matters outside the palace, and he wanted to surprise his wife, Queen Elena. For 5 years, David had believed Elena was the one woman he could trust completely. She had stood beside him during difficult times. She had held his hand when he was grieving. She had smiled beside him whenever the kingdom celebrated his victories. To David, she wasn't simply his queen. She was his wife, his closest companion, the woman he believed would grow old beside him. But that night, everything changed. David entered the palace quietly. The guards bowed as he passed. "Your Majesty," they said. David nodded. "I want to surprise the Queen." "Yes, Your Majesty." He continued toward the royal chambers. But something felt strange. The palace was unusually quiet. As David approached Elena's private chambers, he heard voices. He stopped. One voice belonged to Elena. The other made his blood run cold. His brother, Adrian. David frowned. Why was Adrian in the Queen's chambers at such a late hour? He moved closer. The door was slightly open. Then he heard Elena whisper, "David can never find out." David froze. His heart began pounding. He pushed the door open. What he saw made the entire world seem to stop. Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed. Adrian was beside her. They were far too close. Both of them immediately turned toward the door. Elena's face went pale. Adrian stood. David. David didn't answer. Then, at his brother. His voice finally came. "What are you doing here?" Adrian swallowed. "I can explain." David laughed once. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of a man whose heart had just been shattered. "Explain what?" Elena quickly stood. "David, please." He looked at her. "Don't call my name." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "Please listen to me." "Listen?" David stepped into the room. "I came home expecting to surprise my wife." He pointed toward Adrian. "Instead, I find my wife alone with my brother in her bedroom." Elena shook her head. "It's not what you think." David stared at her. "Then tell me what I should think." She couldn't answer. David looked at Adrian. "And you?" Adrian lowered his head. David's expression hardened. Silence. "How long has this been happening?" Still nothing. David's voice became colder. "I asked you a question." Adrian finally whispered. "Several months." David's eyes closed. Several months. While he had been sleeping beside Elena, while he had been trusting her, she had been secretly meeting his brother. David opened his eyes. He looked at Elena. "Was I ever enough for you?" Elena began crying. "It wasn't supposed to happen." David shook his head. "That's what everyone says when they're caught." He turned away. Then something caught his attention. A small envelope sat on the table. David picked it up. Elena immediately panicked. "David, don't open that." He looked at her. That was enough. David opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. He read the first few lines. His expression changed. Wasn't a love letter. It was a plan. A plan involving secret meetings, private information, and David's decisions as king. He looked up slowly. "What is this?" Elena's face went completely white. Adrian stepped forward. "Give it to me." David pulled the letter away. "No." He read more. Then another page. His breathing became heavier. "You weren't just having an affair." He looked between them. "You were discussing my private affairs." Neither answered. David's voice dropped. "What exactly were you planning?" Elena began trembling. Adrian said nothing, and that silence told David everything. The affair was only the beginning. there was a much darker secret hiding behind it. And David was determined to uncover every piece of it. But neither Elena nor Adrian knew that their betrayal was about to cost them far more than their relationship. It was going to cost them everything. David remained in the room, holding the letter. He read it again. Then once more. His hands were no longer shaking. His heartbreak was slowly turning into anger. The letter contained details that only 3 people should have known: David, Elena, and Adrian. His private meetings, his plans for strengthening the kingdom, information about important alliances, even details about the royal treasury. David slowly looked at Elena. "How did my brother know these things?" he asked. Elena didn't answer. David looked at Adrian. "How?" King David returned home without telling anyone. He had been away for several days handling matters outside the palace, and he wanted to surprise his wife, Queen Elena. For 5 years, David had believed Elena was the one woman he could trust completely. She had stood beside him during difficult times. She had held his hand when he was grieving. She had smiled beside him whenever the kingdom celebrated his victories. To David, she wasn't simply his queen. She was his wife, his closest companion, the woman he believed would grow old beside him. But that night, everything changed. David entered the palace quietly. The guards bowed as he passed. "Your Majesty?" David nodded. "No announcement. I want to surprise the Queen." "Yes, Your Majesty." He continued toward the royal chambers. But something felt strange. The palace was unusually quiet. As David approached Elena's private chambers, he heard voices. He stopped. One voice belonged to Elena. The other made his blood run cold. His brother, Adrian. David frowned. Why was Adrian in the Queen's chambers at such a late hour? He moved closer. The door was slightly open. Then he heard Elena whisper, "David can never find out." David froze. His heart began pounding. He pushed the door open. What he saw made the entire world seem to stop. Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed. Adrian was beside her. They were far too close. Both of them immediately turned toward the door. Elena's face went pale. Adrian stood. David didn't answer. Then at his brother. His voice finally came. "What are you doing here?" Adrian swallowed. "I can explain." David laughed once. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of a man whose heart had just been shattered. "Explain what?" Elena quickly stood. "David, please." He looked at her. "Don't call my name." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "Please listen to me." "Listen?" David stepped into the room. "I came home expecting to surprise my wife." He pointed toward Adrian. "Instead, I find my wife alone with my brother in her bedroom." Elena shook her head. "It's not what you think." David stared at her. "Then tell me what I should think." She couldn't answer. David looked at Adrian. "And you?" Adrian lowered his head. David's expression hardened. Silence. "How long has this been happening?" Still nothing. David's voice became colder. "I asked you a question." Adrian finally whispered. "Several months." David's eyes closed. Several months. While he had been sleeping beside Elena, while he had been trusting her, she had been secretly meeting his brother. David opened his eyes. He looked at Elena. "Was I ever enough for you?" Elena began crying. It wasn't supposed to happen. David shook his head. "That's what everyone says when they're caught." He turned away. Then something caught his attention. A small envelope sat on the table. David picked it up. Elena immediately panicked. "David, don't open that." He looked at her. That was enough. David opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. He read the first few lines. His expression changed. Wasn't a love letter. It was a plan. A plan involving secret meetings, private information, and David's decisions as king. He looked up slowly. What is this? Elena's face went completely white. Adrian stepped forward. Give it to me. David pulled the letter away. No. He read more. Then another page. His breathing became heavier. You weren't just having an affair. He looked between them. You were discussing my private affairs. Neither answered. David's voice dropped. What exactly were you planning? Elena began trembling. Adrian said nothing. And that silence told David everything. The affair was only the beginning. There was a much darker secret hiding behind it. And David was determined to uncover every piece of it. But neither Elena nor Adrian knew that their betrayal was about to cost them far more than their relationship. It was going to cost them everything. David remained in the room, holding the letter. He read it again. His hands were no longer shaking. His heartbreak was slowly turning into anger. The letter contained details that only 3 people should have known. David, Elena, and Adrian. His private meetings, his plans for strengthening the kingdom, information about important alliances, even details about the royal treasury. David slowly looked at Elena. How did my brother know these things? Elena didn't answer. David looked at Adrian. How? Adrian finally spoke. Elena told me. David's eyes hardened. You told him? Elena began crying. I didn't mean for things to go this far. David shook his head. You didn't mean to betray me? I didn't mean to help him against you. Those are 2 different things. Elena lowered her head. David walked toward the table and placed the letter down. Tell me the truth. Neither spoke. David's voice became cold. If I discover that either of you has lied to me again, the consequences will be much worse. Adrian finally sighed. I was angry with you. David stared at him. Angry? You always had everything. The crown, the respect, the power. Adrian's expression hardened. I was your brother, but everyone treated me like I was nothing. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. So you decided to take what belonged to me? Adrian looked away. I thought I deserved more. David looked at Elena. And you? Elena's tears continued falling. I was lonely. David's expression became unreadable. Lonely? I was your wife. You could have spoken to me. I tried. No. David shook his head. You stopped trying. Silence filled the chamber. Then David asked the question that mattered most. Did you ever love me? Elena looked at him. For several seconds she couldn't answer. Finally she whispered, Yes. David looked away. Then you should have left me before betraying me. Elena began sobbing. I was afraid. Of what? Of losing everything. David turned back toward her. And now you've lost it. David's commander entered. Your Majesty. David looked at him. What is it? We searched Adrian's chambers. David's expression changed. And? The commander placed another document on the table. We found evidence that someone has been secretly communicating with people outside the palace. David opened the document. His eyes narrowed. Who? We don't know yet. But the messages were sent using information only someone close to you could have known. David slowly looked at Elena and Adrian. The commander continued. There is more. What? The royal treasury has also been investigated. David's jaw tightened. Why? Because several records don't match. Silence. David looked at Adrian. Then Elena. The 2 of them suddenly looked terrified. David understood. The affair hadn't simply been about betrayal. Someone had been using their relationship to gain access to his power. He turned to the guards. Separate them. The guards stepped forward. Elena immediately grabbed David's sleeve. Please. David looked down at her hand. She released him. I don't want you hurt. David stared at her sadly. You should have thought about that before you betrayed me. The guards led Elena away. Adrian was taken in the opposite direction. As David watched them disappear, he made a decision. He would not confront them with anger. He would uncover everything first. Every letter, every secret meeting, every person involved. And when the truth finally came out, neither Elena nor Adrian would be able to hide behind the crown. That night, David sat alone in his study. The letter remained on his desk. He kept staring at one sentence. Once David loses the trust of the council, everything will become easier. David read it again. Then his eyes narrowed. Someone had been planning to isolate him. Someone had wanted his own council to turn against him. But who? He picked up the letter again. There was a name at the bottom. A name he didn't recognize. David whispered, "Who are you?" He had no idea that the answer would soon lead him to a betrayal far more dangerous than Elena's affair. And somewhere outside the palace, a mysterious figure was already preparing for David's next move. David barely slept that night. The mysterious name at the bottom of the letter kept returning to his mind. Marcus. He had never heard the name connected to his family before. By sunrise, David had made his decision. Find him. His commander bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty. And don't let anyone know we're looking for him." Understood. David wanted answers before Elena or Adrian realized how much he already knew. Meanwhile, Elena sat alone in a guarded room. For the first time since becoming queen, she had no servants around her, no jewelry, no crown, no one calling her Majesty, only silence. She stared at her wedding ring. She remembered the day David had placed it on her finger. He had looked at her as if she were the most important woman in the world. She had promised him loyalty. Now she couldn't even look at herself without shame. A guard entered. "Queen Elena." She looked up. "The king wants to see you." Her heart began racing. Now? Yes. David was waiting in his study when Elena entered. She stopped several feet away. "Your Majesty." David didn't look at her. "Sit." She obeyed. For several seconds there was silence. Then David placed the letter in front of her. "Tell me about Marcus." Elena's face immediately changed. David noticed. "You know him." She swallowed. Don't lie to me." Elena lowered her head. "Who is he?" "He used to work for your father." David's expression hardened. "My father?" "He was one of the men who advised him before you became king." David's eyes narrowed. "What does he want?" "I don't know." "Elena," she looked at him. "Tell me the truth." Tears filled her eyes. "Marcus was the person who encouraged Adrian to approach me." David went completely still. "What?" Elena began crying. "Adrian didn't start everything. Marcus did." David stood. "Why?" "Because he wanted Adrian to become king." David stared at her. "And you?" "He promised me I would remain queen." David's face hardened. "So you knew this was a plan to remove me?" Elena covered her face. "I didn't understand how far they intended to go." "But you knew enough." She couldn't answer. That silence was all he needed. Hours later the commander returned. "Your Majesty?" "Did you find him?" "Yes." David looked up. "He has been meeting secretly with several council members." "Take me there." Meanwhile, Adrian had received a secret message. "Leave tonight." He read it twice. Then he realized something. Marcus wasn't coming to save him. He was abandoning him. Adrian's face darkened. For months, he had believed Marcus was helping him take control. Now he understood the truth. Marcus had been using him. Adrian rushed toward the secret exit, but before he could reach it, the royal guards surrounded him. He stopped. David stepped out from behind them. Going somewhere? Adrian's face went pale. David. I was afraid. David walked closer. Good. Adrian looked confused. David's expression was cold. Because now you finally understand how it feels to be afraid. David ordered Adrian taken into custody. Then he turned toward his commander. But Marcus had already disappeared. The investigation revealed that he had escaped before the guards arrived. David stood in silence. The man behind the entire scheme was gone. But he had left something behind. A final letter. David opened it. Only one sentence was written inside. You think your family betrayed you. You haven't discovered who betrayed you first. David stared at the words. For the first time, he wondered whether the affair had been part of something even bigger. Was Adrian really acting alone? Was Elena? Or had someone inside the palace been manipulating all of them? David folded the letter. Find him. His commander nodded. David looked toward the palace gates. Because I'm not stopping until I know the entire truth. And while David began hunting for the man behind the conspiracy, Elena and Adrian were about to discover that Marcus had never intended to protect either of them. He had only used their greed and weakness to get closer to the throne. Their betrayal had been the beginning. The real danger was still coming. 3 days passed. Marcus was nowhere to be found. David ordered his guards to search every place where the man had connections, but every lead ended in failure. Then late one evening, a messenger arrived. Your Majesty, we found something. David immediately stood. What? The messenger placed a sealed document before him. This was discovered in an abandoned house outside the capital. Inside were several letters. The first letter was from Marcus to Adrian. The second was from Marcus to Elena. But the third made David's blood run cold. It was addressed to his father. David stared at the signature. His father had died several years earlier, yet the letter had been written recently. He read it carefully. The message revealed that Marcus had been working with someone else, someone who had been secretly influencing the palace for years. David's face hardened. Who delivered this? He asked. We don't know, Your Majesty, came the reply. David folded the letter. Find out, he commanded. Meanwhile, Elena had begun to understand how badly she had been manipulated. She was brought before the council, no longer as queen, but as a witness. The council leader looked at her. Tell us everything, he said. Elena hesitated, then she finally began speaking. I met Marcus through Adrian. He told me David was becoming too powerful. He said Adrian deserved a greater position. If David lost the throne, I would remain queen. One council member asked, Did you know Marcus wanted to overthrow the king? Elena lowered her head. Not at first. But eventually, yes. The room became silent. Why didn't you tell David? Elena's eyes filled with tears. Because I was afraid of losing everything. The council leader shook his head. And now? Elena looked down at her hands. Now I've lost everything anyway. That same night, David visited Adrian. His brother sat behind the bars, exhausted and angry. David stopped outside the cell. Tell me about Marcus. Adrian looked away. I don't know where he is. You know enough. Adrian remained silent. David continued. You betrayed me. I know. You betrayed our family. I know. Prevent something worse. Adrian finally looked at him. You don't understand. Then make me understand. Adrian sighed. Marcus told me he had people inside the palace. People who would help him control everything after you were removed. David's expression hardened. Who? Adrian shook his head. I never knew all their names. Then tell me the ones you know. Adrian hesitated. There was someone close to you. David's eyes narrowed. Who? Adrian looked toward the corridor, then whispered, The royal treasurer. David froze. The royal treasurer had served his family for more than a decade. David had trusted him completely. Adrian continued. He was the one giving Marcus information about the treasury. David stepped back. How long? Years. David's expression became cold. Suddenly, everything made sense. Secret letters. The attempts to weaken the council. The affair. Marcus hadn't created the entire plan. He had built a network, and Elena and Adrian had only been two pieces of it. David immediately summoned the royal treasurer. The man entered the study calmly. Your Majesty. David watched him carefully. I have some questions. Of course. David placed several documents on the table. These records don't match. The treasurer smiled nervously. There must be an accounting error. David stared at him. There are no accounting errors. The man's smile disappeared. David stood. How long have you been working with Marcus? Silence. Then the treasurer suddenly turned toward the door. The guards blocked his path. He knew. David already knew everything. The treasurer slowly lowered his head. I can explain. David's voice was cold. He looked toward the guards. Take him, he said. The guards seized the man. But before they could leave, the treasurer laughed. David frowned. What is funny? The man looked at him. You still don't understand, he said. David stepped closer. Understand what? The person who started all of this was never Marcus. David's expression changed. The treasurer smiled. Marcus was only following orders. Whose orders? The man looked directly into David's eyes. Then he whispered a name. David froze. It was someone he never expected. Someone whose betrayal would hurt more than Elena's affair. And suddenly, David realized the greatest danger wasn't outside his palace. It had been standing beside him all along. David stared at the treasurer. Say the name again. The man swallowed. I can't. You already said it. Now say it again. The treasurer looked terrified. The person behind Marcus was your own mother. David froze. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. My mother? The treasurer nodded. She believed the throne should never have passed to you. David's face hardened. Why? She believed Adrian was more suitable to rule. David took a step back. Everything suddenly felt unreal. His mother had always been the person he trusted most. She had advised him after his father's death. She had stood beside him when he became king. She had told him that families should always remain united. And now, he was discovering that she had been secretly working against him. Why would she do this? The treasurer lowered his head. She believed you were destroying the family legacy. David's eyes narrowed. That makes no sense. She wanted Adrian on the throne, and Marcus was supposed to make that happen. David looked toward the guards. Bring my mother here. An hour later she entered the room. Too calm. She smiled when she saw David. My son. David stared at her. Don't call me that. Her smile disappeared. What happened? David placed the documents on the table. I know. She looked at the papers, then at him. You know what? Everything. Silence. David's voice shook. You worked with Marcus. She said nothing. You helped Adrian. Still nothing. You knew about Elena. Her expression finally changed. David's eyes filled with anger. Did you know my wife was betraying me with my own brother? His mother sighed. I knew. David felt as though the air had left his lungs. How long? From the beginning. He stared at her. She continued. I didn't approve of the affair, but I knew it was happening. And you did nothing? I believed it would eventually serve a greater purpose. David shook his head. You used my marriage. I used the situation. You destroyed my family. No. She looked at him. You destroyed it yourself. David's expression hardened. My choices had nothing to do with your betrayal. She stepped closer. You were never supposed to be king. David froze. What? Your father wanted Adrian to inherit everything. But you were chosen instead. Because you were stronger. Because the council trusted you. And I hated that. David's eyes filled with tears. So you tried to take the throne from me. She nodded. I wanted to restore what I believed belonged to Adrian. David looked away. For the first time in his life, he realized that the people closest to him had been fighting against him for years. But there was one thing his mother hadn't expected. David had already secured the council's loyalty. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus was captured 2 days later. The royal treasurer confessed. Adrian admitted his role. And Elena finally told the council everything she knew. The entire conspiracy collapsed. David's mother was stripped of her influence and imprisoned. Marcus was sentenced for conspiracy and treason. The treasurer lost everything. Adrian was stripped of his position and sent away from the palace. And Elena, she was permanently removed from the throne. Her marriage to David was officially dissolved. She would never again be allowed to claim the title of queen. That evening, David stood alone on the balcony. The palace was quiet. He had won. The conspiracy was over. His crown was safe. But David didn't feel victorious. He felt empty. He had lost his wife, his brother, his mother, almost everyone he had once trusted. His commander approached. David didn't turn. Is it finished? Yes. David nodded. Then let it end. He looked toward the horizon. I don't want to spend the rest of my life surrounded by betrayal. His commander smiled faintly. Perhaps you should leave the palace for a while. David looked at him. Perhaps. He had no idea that leaving the palace would lead him to someone who would completely change his understanding of love. Someone named Lisa. But he would not meet her yet. First, David needed to learn how to live without the people who had betrayed him. For the first time in years, David left the palace without a crown. He traveled quietly with only a few trusted guards. He needed distance, not from his responsibilities as king, but from the memories that had filled every corridor of his home. He eventually reached a small town several hours away. David walked through the busy market in plain clothing. For once, nobody recognized him. He watched people buying food, merchants arguing over prices, and children running between stalls. It felt strangely peaceful. Woman. Voice. Please, you can't take that man's money. David turned. A young woman stood between an elderly merchant and a wealthy trader. She had long dark hair and a calm but determined expression. The trader frowned. This doesn't concern you. It does when you're cheating someone who can't defend himself. David watched with interest. The woman handed the elderly merchant some money. Take this. The old man shook his head. I can't accept this. You can. She smiled. Just promise me you'll eat today. David smiled, without realizing it. The woman wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply helped, because someone needed help. The merchant thanked her. She turned to leave. David stepped forward. You have a habit of interfering in other people's problems. She looked at him. Only when someone is being treated unfairly. David smiled. What's your name? Lisa. He nodded. Lisa. She looked at him suspiciously. And yours? David hesitated. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. He couldn't exactly tell a stranger that he was the king. So he simply answered, David. Lisa smiled. Nice to meet you, David. David watched her disappear into the crowd. He couldn't explain why, but something about her stayed in his mind. The next morning, David returned to the market. He told himself it was because he wanted breakfast, but deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to see Lisa again. He found her near the same market stall. She was helping the elderly merchant arrange his goods. When she noticed David, she smiled. "You came back," she said. David nodded. "I was hungry." Lisa laughed. "Of course you were." They spent the next hour talking. Lisa told him about her simple life. She had no interest in wealth, no desire for status. She believed a person's character mattered more than their possessions. David listened carefully. He didn't tell her he was king. He wanted to know what she thought of him without the crown. And for the first time in years, David felt comfortable. There were no political conversations, no hidden agendas. Just two people talking. Days passed. David kept returning to the town. Lisa never asked him for anything. She never tried to impress him. She didn't even know he was the king. One evening, they sat beside a quiet river. Lisa looked at him. "You seem sad." David smiled faintly. "I'm trying to move forward." "From what?" He looked at the water. "A betrayal." Lisa didn't press him. Instead, she said, "Sometimes the people who hurt us teach us what we should never accept again." David looked at her. "And what if you can't trust anyone afterward?" Lisa smiled gently. "Then don't rush. Trust should be earned." David remained silent. Her words touched him deeply. Lisa had no idea how much he needed to hear them. Meanwhile, back at the palace, David's commander received troubling news. Queen Elena had disappeared. She had left the place where she was staying without permission. Nobody knew where she had gone. She had sent one message: "I have nothing left to lose." The commander immediately sent word to David. When David read the message, his expression changed. He looked toward Lisa. For the first time since meeting her, the peace he had found was threatened by the past. Because Elena was still out there, and she wasn't leaving quietly. She was coming back. But this time, David would have to protect not only himself, he would have to protect Lisa too. David read the message again. "I have nothing left to lose." For a moment, he said nothing. Lisa noticed the change in his expression. "Is something wrong?" David folded the letter. "Someone from my past has returned." Lisa studied him. "Someone dangerous?" David nodded slowly. "Possibly." Lisa didn't ask for details. Instead, she said quietly, "Then you shouldn't face it alone." Those words stayed with David. Elena had once said she loved him. Ryan had once called him brother. His own mother had called him son. All of them had betrayed him. Yet this woman, who had known him for only a short time, was willing to stand beside him without even knowing his full story. David looked at Lisa. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not asking questions you're not ready to hear the answers to." Lisa smiled. "When you're ready, you'll tell me." That evening, David returned to the small house where he was staying. But before he could enter, one of his guards approached. "Your Majesty." David turned. "What happened?" David's expression hardened. "Where?" "Near the old road leading back to the palace." "Is she alone?" The guard hesitated. "No." David immediately understood. "Who is with her?" "Two men believed to be loyal to Marcus." David's eyes narrowed. "Marcus is already imprisoned." "Then what are they planning?" "We don't know." David looked toward the town. His first thought was Lisa. "Take the guards and secure her." "Yes, Your Majesty." "And don't hurt her." The guard bowed. David walked away. But he didn't notice someone watching him from across the street. Elena. She had already found him, and she had seen Lisa. Later that night, Elena stood in the shadows outside the town. Her eyes were fixed on the small house where David was staying. She had expected to find him broken. Instead, he looked peaceful. And that made her angry. She had lost her crown, her marriage, her place beside David. Now she was discovering that he had begun building a new life without her. Then she saw Lisa. Elena's expression changed. So, that's her. One of the men beside her nodded. Yes. Elena stared at Lisa. Does he love her? We don't know. Elena clenched her fists. He will never love another woman the way he loved me. The man looked at her carefully. And if he does? Elena turned toward him. Then I'll make sure he loses her too. The following morning, David went to the market. Lisa was waiting for him. But something was different. She looked worried. David, what happened? Someone came looking for you. David's expression changed. Who? I don't know. What did they say? Lisa shook her head. They asked questions about me. David immediately became serious. Did they threaten you? No. But they wanted to know how long I've known you. David looked around. He realized Elena had already begun gathering information. He took Lisa's hand. We need to leave and pause. Lisa looked at him. Why? Because my past has found us. They left the market quickly. As they walked toward the house, David finally decided that Lisa deserved the truth. Lisa. She looked at him. My name isn't simply David. She waited. She waited. I am the king. Lisa stopped walking. For several seconds, she stared at him. The king? David nodded. She looked stunned. You lied to me. I hid the truth. That's still a lie. David lowered his head. You're right. Lisa stepped away. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted one person to know me without seeing the crown. Lisa was silent. David continued. I've been betrayed by people I trusted more than anyone. I didn't want what happened before to happen again. Lisa looked at him. And you thought I would betray you? No. David shook his head. I was afraid. Lisa's expression softened slightly. You should have trusted me enough to tell me. I know. She looked away. Then she whispered, I'm not angry because you're king. I'm hurt because you didn't trust me. David nodded. I understand. He didn't try to defend himself. He simply accepted it. After a long silence, Lisa looked back at him. Come with me. David was surprised. Where? Somewhere we can talk without hiding. That night, they sat beside the river where they had first spoken about trust. David told Lisa everything. Elena, Adrian, the affair, the conspiracy, the betrayal, his family, and the reason he had left the palace. Lisa listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked at him. You've been carrying all of this alone. David nodded. Not anymore. Lisa reached for his hand. You don't have to. David looked at their hands. For the first time since his marriage ended, he felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. But neither of them knew that someone was watching them from the trees. Elena. She had heard everything. And now she knew the truth. David wasn't simply spending time with Lisa. He was falling in love with her. Elena turned away. Her eyes hardened. If I can't have him, she whispered, neither will she. And with that, Elena began planning her most dangerous move yet. Elena's anger had consumed whatever regret remained inside her. She had already lost David. She had lost her crown. She had lost the respect of everyone who once bowed to her. But watching David with Lisa made her realize something she couldn't accept. David was happy. Without her. And that hurt more than anything. She returned to the abandoned estate where she had once secretly met Adrian. There, she found something she had forgotten. A small locked chest. Inside were letters, old documents, and a list of people who had once supported Marcus. Elena stared at the documents. Then she smiled bitterly. If David wants to forget me, then I'll remind him of everything. Meanwhile, David and Lisa returned to the palace. David had decided it was time for Lisa to meet the council. Not as a queen, not as someone seeking power, but simply as the woman he trusted. Lisa was nervous. What if they don't accept me? David smiled. They don't have to. She looked at him. What? I don't want you to become someone else just because you're standing beside me. I want you to remain Lisa. She smiled. And what if I don't want a crown? David laughed softly. Then you won't wear one. Lisa looked at him for a long moment. You're different from the man I first met. David smiled. You helped me become different. That evening, David and Lisa walked through the palace gardens. David stopped beside a fountain. I want to ask you something. Lisa turned toward him. What? Would you ever consider staying here? Are you asking me to move into the palace? I'm asking you to stay in my life. Lisa's eyes softened. She reached for his hand. I already am. David smiled. Then he leaned closer. But before their lips could meet, a guard rushed toward them. Your Majesty. David turned. What happened? We found something at the palace gates. The guard handed him an envelope. David opened it. Inside was a letter. His expression immediately changed. Lisa noticed. What is it? David handed her the letter. She read it. Only one sentence was written. If you want to know the truth about your marriage, come alone. Lisa looked at David. It's from Elena. David nodded. That night, David went to meet Elena. He refused to take Lisa with him. He didn't want her involved. An abandoned chapel. When David entered, she smiled. You came. Why did you call me here? Elena held up a document. Because I know something you don't. David's eyes narrowed. What? She stepped closer. The affair between me and Adrian wasn't the beginning. David stared at her. What are you talking about? Elena smiled sadly. Your brother wasn't the person who first tried to destroy you. Someone else started it. David's expression hardened. Who? Elena handed him the document. David opened it. His eyes widened. The document contained evidence that someone had been manipulating Adrian long before Elena ever became involved with him. And the name at the bottom was someone David had believed was dead. David looked up. Where did you get this? Elena smiled. From someone who wants you to know the truth. Who? Before she could answer, a loud sound came from outside. The chapel doors slammed shut. David turned. The windows were suddenly covered. Smoke began filling the room. Elena screamed. David! David grabbed her arm. Stay behind me. For the first time, Elena looked genuinely terrified. David searched for an exit. Someone had trapped them inside. And then a voice came from outside. King David, your past has finally caught up with you. David's expression hardened. He pulled Elena away from the smoke. But he couldn't understand one thing. If Elena had been telling the truth, who was behind this? And why had they chosen tonight? Outside the chapel, Lisa stood frozen in the darkness. She had secretly followed David, and she had just heard the voice. A voice she recognized, someone she never expected to see again. The person behind everything was much closer than David realized. Lisa stood in the darkness outside the chapel, her heart pounding. She had heard it before. Not recently, years ago. Before she ever met David, before she understood anything about the palace. The voice belonged to Marcus. But that was impossible. Marcus was supposed to be imprisoned. Lisa stepped closer to the chapel. David! Inside, David heard her voice. Lisa? Elena looked at him in shock. She's here? David's expression changed. What is she doing here? Before he could say anything else, the chapel doors burst open. Several armed men rushed inside. David immediately stepped in front of Elena. Stay behind me. The first attacker charged. David blocked him and struck him to the ground. Another came from the side. David fought back, but there were too many. Then Lisa appeared in the doorway. David! He turned. Lisa, get out! She refused. I came for you. David immediately crossed the room and stopped him. Don't touch her. The attacker backed away. David's guards finally arrived from outside and overwhelmed the remaining men. Silence returned. David looked at Lisa. What were you thinking? Lisa's eyes filled with tears. I was worried about you. You could have been killed. So could you. David couldn't argue with that. Then a slow clap echoed through the chapel. Everyone turned. A man stepped out from behind a pillar. Marcus. David stared at him. You. Marcus smiled. You finally understand. David's hand went to his sword. You should be in prison. Marcus laughed. That was never going to hold me for long. David looked toward his guards. Take him. But Marcus didn't move. Instead, he smiled. You still don't know why I did any of this. You betrayed my family. No. Marcus shook his head. I exposed your family. David froze. Marcus continued. Your father hid things from you. Your mother manipulated you. Your brother wanted your crown. Your wife betrayed you. Your treasurer stole from you. I didn't create those weaknesses. I simply used them. David's expression hardened. You destroyed people's lives. Marcus looked at Elena. She destroyed her own life. Then he looked at David. And so did you. David stepped toward him. What do you want? Marcus smiled. Nothing. David frowned. I've already lost. I simply wanted you to see the truth. David looked confused. Marcus continued. You think Lisa is different from everyone else. Lisa's face went pale. David immediately turned toward her. Leave her out of this. Marcus laughed. You don't know her as well as you think. Lisa stepped forward. Don't listen to him. Marcus looked at her. Tell him. Tell him where you came from. David stared at Lisa. About. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. David. Marcus smiled. She has a secret too. David's expression changed. Lisa? She couldn't speak. Marcus walked toward the door. You wanted the truth. Now you have it. The guards moved to stop him. But Marcus suddenly threw a small smoke bomb onto the floor. Within seconds, the chapel filled with smoke. When it cleared, Marcus was gone. David turned toward Lisa. What was he talking about? Lisa looked down. I wanted to tell you. When? I was afraid. David's heart sank. He had heard those words before. From Elena. From Adrian. From everyone who had betrayed him. Lisa stepped closer. But I'm not Elena. David stared at her. Then tell me the truth. Lisa wiped away her tears. N.P.S. My father worked for Marcus. David's expression changed. What? He was involved with the people who helped Marcus years ago. I never knew everything they were doing. But after I discovered the truth, I left. David remained silent. Lisa continued. I met you without knowing who you really were. I never came near you for your crown. I never wanted your money. I only fell in love with the man I met in that market. David looked at her. He remembered every moment, every conversation, every time Lisa had helped someone without expecting anything. Every time she had encouraged him to trust again. He stepped closer. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was terrified you'd think I was another betrayal." David reached for her hand. "I don't want to punish you for someone else's crimes." Lisa looked at him. "Then you believe me?" David nodded. "I believe you." Behind them, Elena watched silently. For the first time, she understood the difference between what she had with David and what Lisa had. Lisa hadn't fought for David's crown. She had simply loved him. Elena lowered her eyes. She finally realized that the person she had lost wasn't just a king. She had lost a good man because she had chosen betrayal over honesty. David turned to the guards. "Find Marcus." Then he looked at Lisa. "And this time, we finish it together." But neither of them knew that Marcus had already begun his final plan. And his target wasn't David's crown anymore. The palace was placed under heavy guard. David knew Marcus was no longer interested in simply escaping. He wanted revenge. And now that Marcus knew Lisa was important to David, she had become his greatest weakness. David looked at his commander. "Double the guards around Lisa." The commander nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." Lisa stood nearby. "I don't want guards following me everywhere." David turned toward her. "This isn't about controlling you. It's about keeping you alive." Lisa sighed. "I understand." David stepped closer. "I've already lost too many people because I trusted the wrong ones." Lisa looked into his eyes. "Then trust me." David smiled. "I do." That night, David couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, thinking about everything that had happened. Elena, Adrian, his mother, Marcus, and now Lisa. He wondered how much more pain one person could endure. Then someone knocked. David turned. "Come in." It was Lisa. She entered quietly. "Are you awake?" "I couldn't sleep. Neither could I." She stood beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lisa said, "I know you're afraid." David looked at her. "Of losing you." She smiled sadly. "From every danger." "I know. But you can choose who you trust." David reached for her hand. "And I choose you." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. She leaned closer. David gently held her. For the first time, neither of them needed words. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A prisoner was brought before David. It was one of Marcus's men. The man had been captured near the Eastern Road. David looked at him. "Where is Marcus?" The prisoner remained silent. David placed the document on the table. "We know he has been planning something." The man smiled. "You'll never stop him." "Where is he?" The prisoner finally spoke. "He's going after the person you love." David's expression hardened. "Lisa." The man nodded. "He knows she is your weakness." David immediately stood. "Where?" The prisoner laughed. "Too late." David rushed toward Lisa's chambers. The guards were already on the floor, unconscious. The door was open. Lisa was gone. David's heart stopped. He ran inside. On the bed was a single letter. He opened it. "Come to the old estate alone." Below it was another line. "If you bring soldiers, Lisa dies." David crushed the letter in his hand. His commander arrived. "Your Majesty." David turned. "Find every road leading to the old estate. Should we send troops?" David hesitated. Marcus had threatened Lisa's life, but David couldn't walk blindly into a trap. Then he remembered something Lisa had once told him. Trust should be earned. David looked at his commander. "Send the soldiers secretly." At the old estate, Lisa was tied to a chair. Marcus stood in front of her. You ruined everything. Lisa stared at him. No, you did. Marcus laughed. David was supposed to be alone. He was supposed to lose everyone. But then you appeared. Lisa remained calm. You can't destroy him. Marcus stepped closer. You don't understand. I don't need to destroy him. I only need him to believe that everyone he loves will eventually betray him. Lisa shook her head. He doesn't believe that anymore. Marcus frowned. Why? Because he knows the difference between you and me. Marcus's expression darkened. Before he could respond, a loud crash came from outside. Marcus turned toward the window. David's soldiers had surrounded the estate. Marcus smiled. You think you've won? At him. No. David has. The doors suddenly burst open. David entered. His eyes immediately found Lisa. Lisa! She looked at him. David! Marcus grabbed her arm. One more step and she dies. David stopped. His guards raised their weapons. Marcus smiled. You see? You're still the same. You'll sacrifice everything for someone you love. David looked at Lisa. Then at Marcus. No. Marcus frowned. David's expression was calm. I won't sacrifice anyone. You will surrender. Marcus laughed. You think I'll surrender? David nodded. Because you have nowhere left to run. Marcus looked around. The soldiers surrounded every exit. For the first time, his confidence disappeared. Your game is over. Marcus tightened his grip on Lisa. Then suddenly, Lisa moved. She struck Marcus's arm and broke free. David rushed forward. The guards seized Marcus. He fought desperately, but it was over. David pulled Lisa into his arms. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head. I'm okay, she said. David closed his eyes for a moment. He had nearly lost her. Again. Marcus was taken away in chains. But before leaving, he looked at David. You'll regret trusting her. David didn't answer. He simply held Lisa's hand, because for the first time, he wasn't afraid to trust. And he knew something Marcus would never understand. Love wasn't a weakness. The wrong people had simply taught him to fear it. But the story wasn't over yet. David still had one final decision to make. He had to decide whether he was ready to give Lisa something he had once given Elena. His heart. His heart was finally imprisoned. His entire network had collapsed. Adrian had been stripped of his position. Elena had lost her crown and was living far from the palace. David's mother had been removed from power. The royal treasurer had confessed to his crimes. For the first time in years, there were no secrets left, hiding behind the palace walls. But David still had one final battle to fight. It wasn't against an enemy. It was inside his own heart. One evening, David stood alone in the palace garden. Lisa found him there. You've been quiet, she said. David smiled. I've been thinking, he said. About what? She asked. Us, he replied. Lisa's expression became serious. David took a slow breath. I've been afraid of making the same mistake twice, he said. Lisa looked at him. You won't, she said. How do you know? David asked. Because you aren't the same man you were, she replied. David smiled. You helped me see that, he said. Stepped closer. I never wanted to replace Elena. I know. I don't want her crown either. David nodded. I know that too. Lisa looked into his eyes. I only want you. David reached for her hand. And I want you. But David wasn't finished. The next morning, he summoned the council. Everyone gathered in the great hall. David stood before them. I have made a decision. The council waited. I will not force Lisa to become queen simply because she loves me. Several members exchanged surprised looks. David continued. She deserves the freedom to decide what kind of life she wants. Then he turned toward Lisa. Lisa, I want you beside me. Not because you need a title, not because you need a crown, but because I love you. The hall became completely silent. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. She walked toward him. I don't need the crown. David smiled. Then don't wear it. She took his hand. But I will stay beside you. The council rose. One by one they bowed, not because Lisa had become queen, but because they had finally seen the kind of woman David had chosen. A woman who wanted the man, not the throne. Months later, David and Lisa were married. There was no political arrangement, no secret plan, no manipulation, just love. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. David looked at Lisa as she walked toward him. He remembered the first day he had met her. She had been helping a stranger in a marketplace. She hadn't known he was king. She hadn't wanted his wealth. She hadn't cared about his crown. She had simply been kind. And that was exactly what David had been looking for without knowing it. When Lisa reached him, David whispered, "You changed my life." Lisa smiled. They exchanged their vows. And when they finally stood together as husband and wife, David knew something. His first marriage had taught him what betrayal looked like. His second chance had taught him what love should feel like. Far away from the palace, Elena heard the news. She sat quietly, as someone told her that David had married Lisa. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she smiled sadly. I hope he's happy. She had finally accepted that David's happiness no longer belonged to her. Adrian also heard the news, but unlike Elena, he remained bitter. He blamed David. He blamed Marcus. He blamed everyone except himself. He had wanted the crown. Instead, he lost his brother, his position, his reputation, and the woman who had once helped him. He spent the rest of his life regretting the choices that had brought him there. Marcus never escaped prison. His conspiracy became a warning throughout the kingdom. The royal treasurer was sentenced for his crimes. David's mother lived away from the palace under strict restrictions, and Elena never returned to David. There was no dramatic reunion, no sudden forgiveness that erased everything. David had forgiven her, but forgiveness did not mean returning to the past. He had chosen a different future. Years later, David and Lisa stood together on the palace balcony. The kingdom was peaceful. Do you ever regret meeting me? Lisa smiled. Never. David laughed. Even after everything? Especially after everything. She rested her head against his shoulder. David looked across the kingdom. He had once believed that losing his first love meant his life was over. He had been wrong. Sometimes the person who breaks your heart isn't the person you're meant to spend your life with. Sometimes betrayal closes one door, so that a better one can finally open. David kissed Lisa's forehead. I love you. Lisa smiled, and I love you. And this time, there were no secrets, no betrayal, no hidden plans. Only two people who had chosen each other freely. The king had lost his queen, but he had found his true love. And this time he wasn't going to let fear take it away. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment to let us know your favorite part. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our daily love stories filled with romance, drama, and unforgettable endings. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in the next story.